My name is Bhakti, and I was just going to say I'm the director of outreach, and then I was like, no, I'm not. Because still, about a couple of months ago, I was the director of outreach at a university. I've spent about 18 years in the space and seen the space from all angles, whether it's a school angle of outreach and admissions, or universities, or edtech. I've kind of donned multiple hats. And as a result, I've made some wonderful friends and comrades who are sitting here today with me. Um, the context of this whole conversation started with Amrita, and Amrita has been newly introduced to the murky world of outreach. So Amrita has a lot of opinions on what she's experienced, and we had a conversation about what are we doing and why are we doing what we do and what does it all even mean, right? And I have an extremely I have a brain that functions in numbers largely. And so when we were having this conversation, I said, so we are talking about metrics, we're talking about quantifiability, and that is how we came up with this topic. I want to quickly introduce my co-panelists before I hand over the mic to Amrita to set the context for a couple of more minutes. Um, there's Swaraj, of course. Who here does not know Swaraj Nandan? Leave right now. He's the OG of outreach. He started and co-founded this legendary organization called KIC Universist. Most universities globally um, undertake their outreach efforts through KIC. I'm not selling them, I don't need to. Most of your clients already. But the fact is that KIC has been at the forefront of a lot of innovation and outreach. So, from the perspective of neither school nor university, but someone who witnesses experiences of outreach folks globally every single year for the last 20 years, Swaraj has a huge locus standi to be here. And then, of course, there's Anju Devskar. Anju is the director of outreach and admissions at Flame, one of the fastest growing, most popular liberal arts universities in India. And Flame University has done in the last decade what most Indian private universities only dream of doing. They have doubled and tripled their numbers in ways that only Anju knows. So after this, you know who to kidnap. All right. And then, of course, there's Amrita Gulati. Amrita is again a legend. She's been with IC3 for years. She headed the institute and their academics, and now has recently forayed onto the dark side. Amrita has forayed into the dark side. Welcome to the dark side, Amrita. So, Amrita, over to you to set further context.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, so the teacher in me never dies. I come from a background of teaching, and I was thinking about now that I'm on the dark side in glittery, shiny clothes to beat the darkness. I was thinking about how we can connect the dots. So I've been at a school in a classroom situation. I've been in an individual counseling situation. Then I worked with the higher ed. I was at Ashoka and I was responsible for outreach of the summer programs and of the summer semesters to bring in domestic students. And then I was at IC3 training counselors and, involving or partnering with universities in that process and trying to get them on board for a mission like this, for which we're all here together. And then now I work at Acumen with over 100 universities in India and South Asia for their school strategy and school engagements to build their visibility in K-12. So the big question to me is, what am I thinking in my office as a university? What do I think outreach means? I go out and I do XYZ. How is that perceived by other stakeholders in the ecosystem who are at the receiving end? Does it translate and add up the way we think it will? If it doesn't, why doesn't it? And what are the possibilities that exist? So I'm trying to sort of, in all the conversation today, you'll sort of see how outreach, how the conversation will change from the origin of outreach or where it starts from, and and it moves to different stakeholders, and what does it mean and how can we bring that together? So that was really the conversation that we wanted to build. And I think I was just curious to see that what we think in our head and go ahead and invest in, does that translate and do something, and does is that something quantifiable, right? Or when, like Bhakti says, when you go back from a tour and your boss asks you what's the outcome, how do you sort of respond to that, right? And what and how do you also show that outcome? How do you even communicate and articulate that outcome? And is that outcome important for the institution? So that's really the context of putting this together. And of course, we've had a fabulous time listening, exchanging stories, and a lot more. So I hope we are able to pass on that little bit of inside conversations and fun as we go along.
Thanks, Amrita. I tried to turn on the other mic, but it's not working if someone wants to check that out. Um, so, you know, when we started working for this session, we Googled a lot of stuff. That's what most of us do, right? You Google stuff that you're going to talk about, and you want to know what's out there on the internet. Has someone been smarter than you, done it before? Why recreate and duplicate the effort? Just download the damn PPT. But there was really not much, honestly. We Googled outreach. There was this huge paper that I found by the University of Arizona. They've done a lot of research on outreach. They've literally published a white paper on outreach. But other than that, like save a couple of these white papers, there really wasn't much out there, which was a bigger challenge because we don't know that in the next 45 minutes are we going to make sense or we're just talking off our heads. So you go figure. But to understand metrics, you need to first understand what is outreach. What are we even talking about? What is outreach? Because I have seen that the definitions of outreach have differed from institution to institution across the universities that I have worked with. So, guys, anyone wants to volunteer the definition? What is outreach? How many universities in this room? Just raise your hands. Okay, so now I'm going to look at you guys when I'm asking these questions. Yes, please.
According to me, okay, I'm Dhara. I'm working for Texas Christian University, and prior to that, I was working with Whistling Woods International. I worked there for 10 years, and I've been into this industry from 11, 12 years now.
What is outreach?
Okay, according to me, outreach is not actual selling, because education is not only selling, it's understanding the students. It's actually, conversions happen when you actually talk to them, understand from where they're coming from. And it's actually counseling. It's a part and support to marketing, but it's not actually selling.
Okay, so it's not actually selling, but it's not actually counseling, but it's conversions. I have to take the mic from you because we have to be very quick about this. Yes.
I think it's about how do you spread awareness about your existence
Awareness.
among your
Okay.
customers.
All right. Awesome. Anyone else wants to volunteer a guess? Yes, Daria? Go for it.
In short, it's like an extent to reaching out, may it be students, may it be anybody in general, but the more goal of the individual should be reaching out to people.
All right. Go ahead.
No, I was like, if anybody, so that you don't have to.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think outreach is about giving accurate information about your university, helping students make informed decisions about universities. It's definitely not marketing, neither is it promoting your university. And from
Isn't it?
No, it is about creating awareness about your university.
But how do you do that
Promote
without
it.
marketing a university?
Promote it in a very ethical way to the children.
Ethical way, okay.
You know, in the sense that we may not be the best choice for that student.
Yeah.
And we need to be very honest about it.
Absolutely.
Saying that, well, you should not be applying to us because we are not the best choice. That's worked very well for me.
Yes.
In these 16 years of outreach work that I have done, that's made a big difference.
Thank you, Sadhana.
Just to say that please
Yeah.
apply to my university is very, very, very wrong.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I have two more.
yeah, let's take two more. All right. I love this.
Beatrice, UC Santa Cruz. You know, in my university system, we make a distinction between outreach and recruitment. Outreach is what you've all spoken of, which awareness, informing, counseling, guiding, process oriented. Recruitment is why your institution, why a student might thrive at your particular institution. So I make a distinction: outreach versus recruitment.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you represent a US university? UC, okay. Yeah, okay.
I also spent all my time in U.S. universities. I would say actually outreach is the Venn diagram intersection of marketing and recruiting. It's the effort you make to get information to students where you anticipate they're going to come back, and it's going to be a conversation instead of a one-way broadcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last one.
I feel it's also to do with collaboration in terms of bridging the gap between expectations. Expectations. What are we expecting, and what is the other on the other end? Students or parents or institutions looking at from the perspective of higher education. So collaboration with, to bridge the gap between expectations is how I.
Thank you for that. The reason this question is important is we are not, by the way, just buying time. We have a lot of ground to cover. But it's, yeah, we literally have a lot of content for you. So it's not like, oh, what's outreach? Let's talk about it for 30 minutes. But the point is, it's important to talk about what is outreach because once again, Google it right now. You're not going to find a document out there that really defines. There's no standard definition of outreach. There's no standard definition of outreach in universities. And when you say outreach, you'll get a lot of results talking about community engagement from universities, but that's a very US context, right? It does not really talk about recruitment oriented outreach. So we've had to create certain definitions, and ta-da, this is the first time you're going to see an outreach definition. There you go. Take a picture. You're witnessing history in the making. Guys, we finally defined the work we do. University outreach refers to the deliberate initiatives undertaken by higher ed institutions to engage prospective students and enhance their brand. These activities aim to raise awareness of the university's programs, values, very important, and opportunities with the ultimate goal of strengthening the institution's brand reputation, improving NPS, which most universities do not even track, net promoter scores, and increasing student enrollment in both degree and non-degree programs. Now, the statements you're going to hear in the next 45 minutes, whether you're from a US university, an Indian university, a European university, understand that we're making broader generic statements. It may or may not apply to your own institution, but this is what we've seen in general. All right, so we've defined outreach. What are metrics? What does metric mean? Calculations, yeah. Of what? Go ahead. Can we have the mic here? Here. No, there. Yeah.
It's data, information.
Okay. Yeah. But what are metrics? Anyone else?
Quantifying the data.
Quantifying, absolutely. Quickly, what is university outreach metrics?
I think it's also the quantitative analysis of each of the aspects. So when you go out for recruitment, you're basically having interactions, you're getting the data, the follow-up after that. So all the analysis that you do, I think that would probably cover the matrix for us.
Absolutely. We also, this is, of course, metrics is defined across the internet. We've taken the statements that make most sense to us. It's clearly measurements, right, used to assess, compare, track performance. But when you talk about in specific context of university outreach metrics, this is how we've defined it. So in the context, they are quantifiable measurements used to assess the effectiveness and impact of outreach programs and initiatives. Fair enough. But they provide tangible data to evaluate performance, track progress, and measure success. Now, the reason we are quantifying this is typically, and I'm going to hand over the mic to Swaraj now, because we want to talk about what are the traditional metrics before we move into the metrics that we recommend you should also be looking at, right? So Swaraj, if you'd be so kind, take over.
And again, I think we have a lot of meat later, so I'm not going to spend much time, right? But this is a typical funnel, right? And there are people in this room who have as much as experience as I'm old, right? And I'm not going to point them out, but just very generically, and from an advertising world, if you really think about it, it's awareness that leads to interest, that leads to desire, and that leads to action. It could be buying of a product, it could be enrollment in the field that we are from, but that is how typically you walk down. And the important thing from an outreach standpoint is for us to realize which part of this funnel are we really trying to attack, or are we trying to attack all the 4 items? Because when we are set out on the road, are we clear about, are we there just to create awareness? And I know we spoke about it, we touched upon it, but is our management clear about, are we clear about what the management expects of us? Because finally, at the end of the day, if they're only looking for action and you're only looking to raise awareness, we're going to have a problem at the end of the year. So we've, this is just one of the examples in terms of how we would look at it, right? It could be engagement events. So, you get out on the road, you have engagement events that lead to awareness. You get leads from there, you generate inquiries. You get into application, some part of them go into the application mode, and then we can actually drill down, right? Applications, how many incompletes, what are the reasons for incompletes, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, at the end of the day, you make an offer. Some of them accept, some of them enroll. Some of them decide to come, some of them melt. So all of those, we were saying metrics or measures. That entire funnel, we have different metrics that go along the entire way. So, and we'll get into it as we get along the discussion, but I just wanted to touch upon that before we get into the next piece.
Thanks, Faraj. Just very quickly, Anju, you wanted to pipe in. Just spending a minute on IDA, especially the A, engagement events. Anju, if you'd like to share your insights.
Again, my background that I come from, I've been a teacher for 15 years in IB and IB schools mostly. So when I came to outreach, and like Bhakti clearly mentioned, there was no definition. Actually, when I was hired, I said, what is outreach? I didn't know about it, honestly speaking. But I knew education, I knew ethics, I knew certain systems and values that we all value actually, and we as parents want to exist even in the ecosystem, because marketing can be really brash if you just put down to numbers. And that's what I absolutely focused on as a center of any engagement from the university perspective. If I'm coming to your school, am I adding even a little bit of value to a student? It's not like, I hate that jargon, and I'm sorry, it's none of anyone's fault here. You go to a place and this is, and I'm going to use it in Hindi, I'm going to say in Hindi, kitna bacha aa raha hai. It just used to put me off, like, it's how many kids are coming? Is outreach about that? And that's where this idea is so important. And you must match your engagement section to the ideology of your management. If it is the action, then yes, ask that question, but know whether it's right for you or not. And if that's not, and it's just awareness and talking about more values and how you're going to align your university brand to the world, then it really needs absolutely rethinking and going back to the chalkboard and have your plan that says the same thing. And also, I think through engagements, what as a university you're talking, I think everybody should be talking about, whether somebody is coming to your campus, right from the security guard speaks the same. And I feel that everybody in your university is an outreach person. You may be having different roles, but we're actually doing it. But the onus lies on our shoulder, and hence, you have to design that whole service. And that's a whole different, it can be a completely different session on service designing your outreach session, where the first time that you ever meet a student till the time the student graduates, Do we finish there? No, they're still our alumni and the brand's still talking. So that's a little bit about, how you want to be engaging audiences and when you talk about your university. And the first question is, what is important? I know university and my friends are around, they say number is the only thing that talks in that boardroom meeting. Nothing else matters. So then please do that. But you should definitely know about it.
Thanks, Anju, and all this coming from a woman who's tripling her numbers every year. How? We'll talk later. But anyway, I think the conversation, I mean, I actually kind of have a very different view of outreach, and I feel like anything that cannot be tracked with outcomes needs to be seriously re examined. And outreach, definitely, while it is a lot about, and this is my personal view, and we all might have different views on this panel. My personal view is outreach without a bottom line is really just, even marketing has a bottom line. When you're doing digital marketing or any kind of marketing, brand building, everything has a bottom line. Outreach has to have a bottom line. And the reason we're having also this conversation is because we just talked about the current metrics of outreach. Now we're moving into why is there a need to re-examine the current metrics. So we said IDA, right? Application. So you have engagement events, which are your top of the funnel events. Then you have the lead generation. Then you have applications, and then you have enrollments. These are broadly the metrics that most universities look at. Anyone differs here? Broadly, I'm saying in the broadest sense. These are the 4 data points that most universities look at. How many events did you do? How many leads did you generate? How many applications did you generate? And how many enrollments did you get? Yeah? Anyone else has another fabulous metric they would like to add to this? Yes.
I think that this is going the multi-year relationship building part of all of this. So sometimes you're doing outreach in 2024 that you know might have a payoff in 2027. So I feel like that model kind of excludes that.
That's the pipeline building bit of it, right? Building relationships for the future, which is also, it's not being I think altruistic or whatever. It's actually critical. It's a smart thing to do. But there's also a lot of universities that are being extremely short-sighted in the investments that they make because they want their results now, today. And that's a huge problem. And I see a lot of outreach folks nodding their heads because you know what I'm talking about. All right, we all know that higher ed is changing, especially international higher ed. How many universities here are non-Indian universities? Just raise your hand. Whoa, okay, that's amazing. So US, Australia, okay, UK, we're turning out here in the same numbers that we get enrollments from India, right? Like we have US, then we have Australia, and then we have UK. Fair enough. India? Wow, we are such lifelong learners, aren't we? All right, okay. So on that note, very quickly, there are certain factors that are impacting why we need to reassess the way we measure outcomes of outreach. Swaraj, Amrita, Anju, and I have actually created a whole metric, which is what we're going to end this session on. But before we get there, we want to quickly spend a few minutes on what is changing in higher ed. And Swaraj, I'd love for you to shed a little bit of light because you work with universities from different countries. And while I know you're not a policy expert, so I understand not asking you about specifics, but genuinely, what is the buzz? What's the chatter? What's the concern from different universities across different countries?
That's a very macro question because right and by the way, that could be another hour session. But what broadly speaking, there's a lot going on out there, and there are controllable factors and there are uncontrollable factors. From a controllable factors, what we are seeing is people are talking budgets, and there are many different reasons. They're also talking about their enrollment trends, and for those of us here in this room from the US, we've been talking about the enrollment cliff for a very long time. Finally, it is here, right? We are going to start seeing those effects in 2025. They will at least last till 2029. And for people who are here from other countries, essentially US folks not stopped, but the number of kids they were having, it started reducing right around the 2007 2008 timeframe. This was right when the financial crisis was happening. And so for this period of 5-6 years, people have less kids, and those are the kids who are turning 18 right now. So from an undergraduate standpoint, we're going to see a dip. At the national level, the dip is going to be about 12%. For some states, especially in the Northeast and in the Midwest, because there's migration that is happening from those regions to the South and the West, it's going to be more prevalent. So states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, you're going to lose 19%. So when from a metric standpoint, you start losing 19% of your domestic, people who should be coming to college, suddenly that's a huge gap to fill. So I know we are talking about that. We are talking about political changes. In the US, we have an election coming up later this year. Latin America, there are some challenges that are happening. Canada, we've heard about the caps. So you name it, Australia caps, right? So there are a lot of things, and I know the factors from the immigration policies. I don't want to even go down that rabbit hole. So tons at the macro level, but also internally, budget pressures. And of course, in terms of whether international or domestic, what is the priority? How much of that is a big priority or small priority? We've seen dramatic changes. One other bit that I really wanted to share, and I don't know if you agree, but we've seen massive change in people in this field in the last 4 years. So the pandemic changed a lot of things. So people reevaluated their life priorities, and many people moved on. Travel was not as attractive anymore. They took other jobs within the university, but we've seen a lot of new faces, and that's good, from getting fresh blood into it. But it also changes how they are evaluating travel, get on the road, outreach. Many of them need a lot of guidance. So yeah, the field is changing dramatically.
And I think this point is actually very personal to me as well. Ever changing immigration policies, volatile economies. I was recently, a couple of months ago, laid off from my job with a Canadian university, and I was at a very senior position. I was heading, a couple of regions globally, and then all of a sudden, overnight, I lost my job. And for someone who's been in the space for this long, it's a punch in the gut, right? When you're asked to leave and you're like, really? Did you just fire me? But yes, because education is not recession proof. Whoever tells you that, this is very old news. Education is not recession proof. There are huge outcomes of what's happening when a country gets into election year. Be rest assured that populist policies are going to change the way we do business in universities. And so whether it's Australia, whether it's UK, whether it's US, or India, we're all going to see those policy changes. The other very, very important point is unpredictable applicant mindsets. How many of you spent over 5 years in outreach? Right? Okay, that's pretty much 30-40% of the room. Have you seen a shift in the kind of questions or interactions that you've had with students in schools? I mean, if you haven't, you can just say, no, sorry, kids are just the same. But I'd be surprised. But yeah, have you seen it? And if you have, what are the changes that you've noticed? Yeah, go ahead. Very quickly.
Yeah. So a lot of change has happened. Many students are making informed decisions, but I also see that the way we are engaging with students now, currently, because of so many universities, you see the career fairs have lost their meaning completely, because you set up those tables and then you're just giving brochures. And how seriously engaged are you with the student? At least if the parents are invited, then they stay with you for 3 minutes. Students have changed because they are a little more confused. They're unable to make informed decisions because so many universities are getting in touch with them. The schools are not able to. There's one counselor, small counseling departments, nobody to guide them properly, and they're very confused.
Yeah, please. Kanchi, Ambika, and then a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, just I'll keep it brief. What I think is that the conversations have become very transactional. I don't know if it's because I've moved from liberal arts to tech, but the question is the ROI or placements. Nobody's asking about the student engagement, student success. So I think that's where it's shifted. I don't know whether it's the parents who are influencing the kids, but it's happened.
Also, you're saying ROI from the students.
Yes.
Yes. 3 out of 10 kids in the last year, and we work with a lot of children, are asking what is the point of going to university. If I can do a so right, and that is a very difficult conversation for me to have because it is not just about the job. Yes, I love the fact that they become employable, but it's also about learning and understanding and social networks and growing up and your prefrontal cortex and everything. So, but and this is something that echoed because we did this at the pre-conference workshop. A lot of people came back and said, 1 in every 3 kids is asking, do I really need to go to university? And if so, how else can I navigate this?
Yeah, but the fact is that the value of a degree is definitely being questioned. There's no doubt about it. Yes, Namita.
I think there's also a lot of the after effects of COVID-19. These kids right now have seen, their friends who were supposed to go to university doing online classes. People had focuses about which destination they wanted, and now they're just like literally applying to multiple places. They're not sure. There's a lot of lack of clarity.
Right. Yeah, there's lack of clarity. There are too many options. There's a changing value of degrees. We'll take the last 2 comments. Yeah.
So, schools and students are bombarding with the agencies and
with agencies.
Kind of agencies, I can say,
like
and
companies,
and then universities as well.
Yeah.
That's making a more confusion stage in the student minds.
Okay, so you're saying there's just too many options, too
many
many people
options.
entering the school and
Same
talking
options,
about options.
Same options, you can say, saying by the every next university. That's amazing.
Also, just adding there, it's also the global labor market. People don't need a degree for certain jobs. They're working remotely. They're working from anywhere in the world. And that is something I think even the universities, we need to reflect and kind of have, the non-degree courses. And that's where the value of a degree, I mean, what options are, they need more options because they're clearly far more informed than probably they should be. And that creates what Namita said, a confusion. Clarity goes into the air, they're further more confused. So yes, that's another.
Just bringing context back to that question, why we're having this conversation. If higher ed is shifting and changing so quickly and so drastically, is outreach keeping pace? That's the question, right? So last comment from you and then we'll move on.
Yeah, just to add on, as Ambika said, they're not really valuing degrees. There's so many students already talking about making money on digital platforms. That is the amount of awareness they have. They talk about, in the morning, they talk about how much they invest in stocks with the pocket money they get, and already making money. And so the question comes, why college? We can do so much online and support our lives. So somewhere the entire value of education, there's they're questioning the way education is actually being delivered. Yeah. So
Thank you for that comment. So there's a survey actually which shows that the number of destinations that a student used to apply to back in 2010 to 2015 was a maximum of home country and maybe two destinations. Now you have students who apply home country and up to 3 to 4 destinations. And not only is the number of destinations or number of applications per student that's increased, they may also be applying for different programs to different destinations, because there is conversation about how you may have different routes to the same outcome, right? So you do, and also they're looking, I think students have gone and families have gone to the level of not just destination but granular details of program comparison between within. So you're, so as an outreach, your pool is not just, we as a university, I may be losing to a university which is in another country altogether. So it's not like which, so I think that's again another consideration. And the influencer network, I want to quickly ask the room here. So when when the survey for IC3 Institute was done last year, it showed parents being the highest influencing factor on students. How many of you agree? Yeah. So, but that, and this was reported by the students, by the way. So there were 10,000 kids who took the survey, and they said parents are the biggest factor. And parents also agreed that they are the biggest factor, right? So if you see the scores on the last survey, it's quite interesting. How many of you think that's not the case? How many of you think alumni influences this decision? How many of you think all the videos, the YouTube, all the influencers that they're seeing? Yeah. How many of you think they're being by neighborhood, peers, neighborhood? Yeah. So how many of you are also seeing kids say that I will decide? Or my parents are okay with what I decide? Right? How many of you have, in your counseling spaces, seen that the conflict between parent and child is reduced, not reduced? Yeah. So see, that's the interesting thing. The conflict hasn't reduced, but we think they're not in it. So it's a huge, even understanding this parent level of influence culturally and how does it manifest really in the situation and at what stage is an important factor for us to consider as an outreach in the whole game of outreach. Yeah.
Lot of students who also say, I don't want to do what my parents want me to do, but eventually, what can I do? I have to do what my parents tell me to do. So that is, even when they visit the counselor, they say, even if you say to my parents, they will still go by what they want me to do.
Yeah, so there is, I think that's what, and it's different in different cities, even within India, it's different. And the other thing I think we have to realize is that a lot of kids, internet and COVID has shrunk the world. Their communities are across borders. They may be bound by interest, and that is also an influencing factor in their decision making. So it's no longer the parents that they see every day, it's also the kids that they're chatting with on an everyday basis, or the community that they may be part of. And of course, all the YouTube and the media influence that is taking over.
Absolutely. And so, with all the shifts in higher ed, and we're going to keep pace. We have about 20 minutes. We have some, Neera will just come to you in a bit. We really brainstormed about what are the current problems in outreach, what are the current challenges, and this is from feedback, personal experience. These are some of the top factors that came out. Sporadic innovation, right? You have universities who are going to go out on a limb one year and say, we're going to start master classes. We're going to start XYZ. We're going to do like this whole skill building program with the school. We're going to do upskilling for teachers. And then it's not sustained. It's not consistent. It's not scalable for whatever reasons. And so there's a lot of innovation, but it's very sporadic. And so you're not able to see really the outcomes of what you've started. Value add. A lot of universities are not being able to add value beyond filling up tables at career fairs. So yes, turn up by all means into schools, stand at that table, talk to students, collect data, all of that. But are you adding any other value? A university is not a degree churning machine. It's an ecosystem, right? You have all kinds of resources and infrastructure. There are so many ways that you can be adding value to a K-12 institution, whether it is through capacity building or academic collaborations or any other methods. So you need to look a little bit beyond the usual of career fairs. Cluttered calendars. How many of you struggle to choose between multiple events in schools, especially those who are based out of India? You, Ambika, you need to solve this problem as well for DPS. But yeah. So there are a huge number of cluttered calendars, right? I have seen days where in a single day you have 7 fairs happening in a city, especially like Delhi. You have 7 schools doing career fairs on the same day, and there's zero consideration for collaboration. So they're all going to do it whenever they want to do it. And if you don't turn up as a university at their school, they're going to feel bad about it. So you better cut yourself into half and turn up, right? Um, Quantity over quality. How many of us just feel like at the end of the year, we just want to tell our bosses, we did 300 fairs this year. We did 150 school visits. We did like 50 presentations. Do those numbers matter? They do. They really do. Because that is your top of funnel. But that's not really like a flex, because that just says a lot about the fact that you're not looking at your data because you don't know where your target audience is. If you're everywhere, you're nowhere. Travel trauma is so real. How many days a month are you on the road, outreach brethren? How many days a month? 15, all right. 25. And I mean, I'm talking about like peak season. You know, there was a time when we said outreach has a season. I'm sorry. Now it's through the year. It's every month is outreach month. Because if you're not running from school fair to school fair, then you're doing open houses. You're doing coffee chats. You're engaging. And then the one weekend in the month that you get to spend at home with your family, no. You got to make them calls. You got to speak and engage with the leads that you generated. There is never a dull moment. It's not okay. The travel trauma is real. And the master of travel, would you want to add to this very
I
quickly?
was saying, and for all of us who have been on the road, we've seen, just to put things in perspective, we've seen rained out, completely getting rained out, floods in Dubai. We've seen heat wave in Kolkata, schools are closed. We've had, we've like heart attacks in Brazil, right? People fall down, they break their hand. So a lot of times people see all those Facebook posts and they're like, oh my God, you're sitting at a beach in Rio. But guess what? Travel trauma is real. And especially what I have to tell you is travel is not what it used to be pre-pandemic. If you know what I mean, flights are getting canceled all the time, missed luggage. Hotels, I know some people try to check in and hotels were out. So and by the way, it's become expensive, really expensive.
Very
That's
expensive.
another trauma.
It's another trauma for the university. And then they're like, oh, you've been on the road for 20 days. You went to like 30 schools. How many leads did you get? And you're like, dude, I just came back. But the travel trauma is very real. And it looks very glamorous to the world that you're on the road, you're visiting exotic places. But we know the fact is that it is extremely strenuous. Very quickly, the other thing is ambiguity of job basics. I've seen a lot of job descriptions for outreach, and there's just too many factors that we're looking for in that one person, because we're saying you have to create awareness, right? You have to generate leads, you have to engage those leads, you have to convert them, then you have to make sure that there's yield. But then you also have to build your brand, and you also have to represent the institution maybe in panel discussions. And then you also have to make sure that counselors love you and they invite you, right? So I think that's a bit much. It's a lot on the plate of an outreach person. Inundated clients. When I say clients in the crudest terms, I'm talking about schools. They are spoiled for choice. It's not necessarily a good thing. There are just too many universities. I have seen career fairs where there are 100 universities turning up for that fair just to talk to about 50 students. That's not a problem. The problem is there's no pre-orientation. So students have no clue when they walk into the damn career fair. Please excuse my language, but I'm very passionate about it, because when you walk into that room, a student literally comes up to your table and says, what is the name of your university? Stupid questions. They're not prepared. I'll give you the names. Yeah. of the schools that has happened. It's true, and it's very upsetting. You don't travel all the way somewhere to a school just so that students come pick up your brochure and leave. They don't even know who's turning up in the room. They have not done any research. The counselor has not even given the list of the universities most times, right? And then what are you supposed to give an elevator pitch because you're a medical representative? It doesn't work like that. And so if you're a school in the room here, please orient your kids. We did a session on this last year. Pre and post, yeah, that's a whole separate session, by the way, last year. All right, so coming to the goal setting checklist. So while outreach challenges, higher ed is shifting, all of that. Now, I'd like to invite Swaraj to talk about why is it important to set goals.
We're gonna go real quick, right? Like, and because we have more to share, and so I'm not gonna go into each of that. But I think the crux of where we are is about goal setting, and most issues that happen at a university are because your management's goals are different than your goals. And it really, it varies by stage of institution in terms of life stage. Some of them really want you to focus on that awareness bit, while others are basically saying, I want to fill these number of seats. And then you can carve it out into, I'm looking at these specific programs, right? I've come up with new programs. That's your focus. The other bit that we spoke about, you have your goals. And, as John mentioned, there are times when people don't understand that this is a 2-year life cycle of when you go, you speak with a child, they apply, and then they come maybe 2 years from then, right? But most times people, and you've heard this at universities, they're like, you went there 6 months ago. Why have I not? There are times when we're speaking with universities in March, and they say, can you bring kids this fall? And I'm like, there's just no understanding of. So most times it's right, we fail right there in terms of goal setting. And I think it's critical for us to define that. Also understand that, how do you play with levers? Most people are like, I want to increase the quality of person I get into. That's a typical goal. I want to get better kids to study here because it's going to have a good impact on our rankings, etc., etc. You can do that, but then there needs to be an understanding that when I give admission offers to higher quality kids, my yield is going to be lower on them. Typically, that understanding is not there. So when we build all our models, right from application to admission, and from a yield and melt, many times those things, I used all the metrics and all the percentages from last year, but I just changed some metrics, some of my requirements from let's say I did SAT or GPA requirement. I changed that, but all the metrics that I use from building out the model, and then they're like, oh, how come you're not meeting the numbers from an enrollment standpoint? So those are the kinds of things. Or they change scholarship strategy, and you didn't assume that was going to have an impact, but that has I've seen tremendous ups and downs from that standpoint. So again, set smart goals. Let's be specific and measurable. Most times that itself, we fail there, right there.
Thank you. And realistic, yeah.
Well, if you set them, they'll be realistic. The problem typically happens because.
All right, so the pièce de resistance that you've all been waiting for. Slide 1, reimagine metrics. Once again, when we Googled it, ChatGPT did it, AI did the hell out of it. There was really not much that we could find in terms of metrics, right? There were different articles mentioning different aspects, but there was nothing that really was a matrix of metrics, right? So we've taken a stab at it. This is rudimentary, but this is based out of everything. And there's another slide after this as well. If you reimagine the role of outreach and say, okay, the role of outreach is all through the funnel, the entire ADA, for example, as unrealistic as it may be, but okay, if that's the goal, The fact is still that outreach is front facing, it's dealing with the external stakeholders, but it's not just dealing with students. It's about relationship management with every external stakeholder outside the university and making sure that the university's best is being featured to relevant stakeholders outside. So whether it's a school, in a school itself, you have counselors, you have school leadership, then you have parents, which we who we rarely speak to as universities. We don't really address them as much as we should. So when you talk about brand awareness, we've basically split it into 5 different segments. There's brand awareness, there's student engagement, there's quality of applications. I'm not getting to detail of each one, but I definitely want to talk about the ones that may be a little bit different. In outreach, we are responsible for promoting, say, for example, pre-college programs for most part. But that is not really, talked about when we talk about performance, right? The reviews. I don't think outreach gets enough credit for the pre-college programs that are being sold because it also turns outreach into a profit center, which a lot of universities don't account for. There are no variables that are built in either for outreach folks for all the additional revenue that's been brought in, whether it's applications or selling the pre-college programs. Also, a very important thing is partnerships. Not many schools, we don't see a lot of partnerships happening between schools and universities. And that's a very, very, very big area that there's a gap for. There are very few universities who have partnerships with schools in India at this point. We're talking about the Indian market. There are very few schools, and they will lap it up if you have the right kind of proposition. Indian schools are very keen to partner with universities, and they very happily display your logo on their websites. Um, the other thing is, of course, the quality of applicants. We do not give enough credit to outreach on enhancing the quality year on year. It's a result of all the brand building that is being done by outreach. The big factor, I'm not saying it's the only factor, but outreach, when you're talking about performance measurement, we do not factor in quality. And some credit needs to be given to outreach for quality. Anyone wants to add anything here in this part of what we've just covered? Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to add for the school events for fairs. How many of you are seeing younger kids, grade 8, 9 kids come for the fairs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What? So that increase. How many of you have seen that they're also more enthusiastic?
Yeah, a lot more.
Or will ask you questions that are very different from the questions that a 11th or a 12th grader would ask.
Yeah.
Right? You'll also see parents of that age group, which means that your pipeline for conversion is more long drawn, right?
Yeah.
When that happens. But how many of us are trained to interact with kids of grade 8 and 9 versus grade 11 and 12, and the kind of questions that they might ask? So how are we training ourselves to make the most of our presence at these fairs, considering that the age group has expanded to which you're reaching out? And also the pipeline, therefore, is more long drawn than immediate, right? And there is a debate on whether universities could, should, if, when invest their time in the younger grades, or should it only be grade 11 and 12? And that's a whole conversation with counselors because they feel the level of influence is different. And also by grade 11, a lot of the kids have already made up their choice, or a lot of them know that this is what I don't want to do, or this is where I don't want to go. Maybe that's clear if, what they've eliminated is defined, but what they've decided is not clear. Whereas when you're interacting with younger grades, it's a more open sort of dynamic. But again, then how do you address that?
Yeah. Just in the interest of time, very quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
So, there's and thanks for bringing this out. And there's an absolute solution looking at outreach calendars. We definitely want to engage with the grade 8s, but not during the peak season, as we may say. So my application's open. There's a typical time of like Jan onward when the board students are busy with their academics. We can definitely engage. So the school representatives here, we can definitely, maybe think about it and, make most of our services available to you at that time. That's one. Second thing about the quality that we were talking about. It's again a very, very, a question that takes us back to the management is when they say the quality, the quantity automatically goes down. You want, everybody like 75% above or 80% above, whatever your matrix may be. That quality goes down. And also, like you mentioned, about the yield, those students will have more options elsewhere as well. So these are something you should be part of when you take your targets. This is just like, initial conversations with your those are the questions you can ask back. Okay, if you're doing this, then this gets impacted. How do I do this?
Yeah, I think most universities kind of arrive at a sweet spot of what's your ideal lead to application to enrollment ratios, and your percentages. You will arrive there along with your brand building and the quality and what's your average SAT score and all of that. Um, just very quickly, the fact is that quality of applications needs to be in some part attributed to the quality of outreach as well. Just bringing this conversation back to metrics. Um, the last 2 points, which we rarely look at: community engagement and profit centers. So, most of the time, what outreach folks do is engage with community. That's like, I think, 50 to 60% of our job is just relationship building. It's meeting people, whether it's students, it's parents, rarely, but counselors, and we're always building relationships, right? Where is that being tracked, accounted for? How do you measure that relationship building? And it's hard, because the fact is, what is the direct outcome of good relationships? For example, some of the things that we think would indicate that you have built strong relationships for yourself as a brand in outreach and for your institution is things like invitations for non-fair engagements. How many schools have reached out to you and invited you for something that was other than a career fair? How many of them have reached out to you and said, come in to our school and talk to the students about XYZ, right? And how many of those schools were engaged with for how many years? All of that can be tracked. What is the timeline of that relationship can absolutely be tracked. Feedback. Most universities do not take feedback from stakeholders. When your team is out there, everyone's experiencing your university's brand through that person. But are we really talking to our stakeholders and saying, how was your experience with our outreach team? Did you understand what they said? Did the students, did they get their doubts cleared? Do you think they were able to represent our brand in the right way? This is very, very important. Last but not the least, very quickly, I know we have a minute, but this is a very important point. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, for the first time ever, has literally featured an entire section on skills that future employers are looking for in their future workforce. And one skill which was a shocker that's made it to that list is social influence. And it's not what you think it means. It is literally digital social influence. So they really, really value people who have a say, a voice, and a reach on social media. And so if your folks are tagging the university and spreading information about your university on their own LinkedIn, Instagram, it's not their job to do it. It's their personal handle. But the fact that they're doing it shows a lot of loyalty, obviously, but it's also reach. So it needs to count for some soft metrics for sure, because they are your brand ambassadors. And last but not the least, profit center through pre-college program revenues. We are out of time. I just want to see if anyone has questions. We'll take maybe one or so. And if nobody has questions, we'll just assume that we were so amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Swati.
So one of the things that we at Masters Union do is we have a team called Parent Engagement Team, which deals with the current parents. And we do a lot of Starbucks mixers across with the current parents, and also do parent teachers meetings, which ideally only happens in schools, but we as colleges don't do that much, right? And then those current parents kind of become your voice in their network, and that has brought in much more admissions than what the outreach team can do. Because when you speak about your brand, it's selling. But when a current parent speaks about your brand, that's when the authenticity comes from.
Thank you, Anju, Amrita, Bhakti, and Swaraj. What a fantastic session. I just want to kind of say one thing, which is the quality of outreach professionals is also very varied, and if I have Anju in a room, I can leave and I know the students will be taken care of, but I can't say that for everyone else. And it's something that we need to maybe some kind of training that they get about their institution, because sometimes even basic questions cannot be answered. It's almost like they were hired, given a script, and they're kind of saying that out. I'm not saying everyone's like that, but I've seen it myself. So it's a challenge, when you are willing to introduce your students to certain outreach professionals, when you're organizing fairs, or when you're inviting them to your school also. So maybe, I don't know, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, this is the last point. Outreach is not a profession you take up after a degree that you do in outreach, right? You can be anything and anyone and you can get into outreach. But the fact is, professional development initiatives do not exist in most universities for us. And that's not okay. You are a counselor, you're an event manager, you are a marketing rep, you are a salesperson, you are so many things, you're all of these things. And who's training you for this? No one. You're left out there. Yeah, you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Some of these fairs, just because you have alumni in India, in South Korea, and budgets are less and less, and no one's selling anything. They're just kind of talking about their experience at the universities, and it's something that I'd like to do more, but I'm curious, is that a new trend, or do we see it becoming a trend?
So I'm gonna basically just lean on my experience and give you my 2 cents. It's a double-edged sword. You better be careful about which alum you're sending. Are they trained? Do they have context? And if it's an alum who went 20 years ago to your university, are they in touch with what's happened since then? Because many times you want to go and talk about your new programs, the data analytics, cybersecurity stuff. They don't know about it. So we have actually seen universities utilize alum, and it's gone both ways. So that's
we do it when the budgets are a challenge.
even.
Just a funny comment on that. We have a great alumni in South Korea who oversees an alumni network. The major that he studied at our university isn't even there anymore. So it was many years ago that he graduated, but he's a great alumni. Long Island University. He studied art therapy management. So just it doesn't exist anymore.
Also, campus life.
Right.
Your community may have changed dramatically. Have they been on campus in the last 1 year? I think is a good. Is an important thing.
All right. We're going to wrap this session just on this note very, very quickly. What you do matters. When you go back into your management's office, sit with your bosses, and they ask you, you spent all this money and you travel to all these places, what is the result? The point is, you cannot feel like you have nothing to say because you don't have metrics that are probably agreed upon. You need to have these conversations with your management. You need to encourage them to pin those KPIs down beyond leads, applications, and enrollments, and ask them to account for all the other work that you do and bring in to building that brand. Because outreach is not time pass. I end there. Thank you so much for being here. And Swaraj.
I just wanted to say, the fact that we had to rush through this and there were so many hands up, this was so interactive and so enjoyable. I think we need to come together as a community for a longer period of time. Maybe next year at the IC3, plan like a 4-hour outreach specific, almost like a community interaction, so that we can learn from each other. Because as we realize the field is changing dramatically, and we are talking alumni to parents being engaged to the students changing. Recently somebody told me that if you're a sustainable university or doing sustainable practices versus you're a higher rank, the kids are actually going for the sustainable thing. you know, and your management needs to hear about that because they're so focused on the ranking and all the decisions they are taking. So all I'm saying is we need to spend more time together with each other. And hopefully throughout the day today, we'll be able to do that. But next year, let's make a commitment to do that for a longer period of time. Thank you.